Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the channel. Today we'll be discussing another Five Nights at Freddy's theory. And I'll be discussing in today's episode the question of why does William Afton kill? And I'll be going over a few theories to why he kills exactly. So allow me to begin, please. The first possible answer to the question of why does he kill is that simply he kills for the love of the game, that he gets joy and excitement out of murdering people. Murderers, especially serial killers, often get excitement out of murdering people, and just the satisfaction of killing people and having control over them and having the power is enough to drive them to continue murdering over and over again. And William has murdered at least two sets of children across a span of about 2 to 3 years, 1985 and in 1987. He murdered a total of 10 children. Of course, he murdered Charlie first in 83, and if you go by what happened in the Ticket to Fun novel, if you consider that to be canon, then he also attempted to murder another child at a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Now, that could be the explanation. That used to be the main idea to why he used to do so way back in the day early on, when we didn't have any reason for him to kill. But nowadays there's some evidence that say that maybe that doesn't kill just for pleasure, but for bigger reasons. Because he made the fun times, he made machines to do the killing for him, he made machines to lure away children. And if he really did kill just for the fun of it, why would he make machines to do it for him when he could be doing it? It'd make more sense that he would want to do it himself than have robots do all the killing, do all the murdering, and lure away the children, when that would just take out the fun of it for him. And of course, the whole thing with remnant and the possession stuff, there's certifiable evidence to say that maybe he does kill for bigger reasons. The next reason is that he kills to try to achieve immortality, to be able to live forever, and that he's a mad scientist experimenting with remnant, which comes from souls, basically, like the agony and pain of the souls, kind of, sort of. And he's doing all these to figure out how to harness the power of remnant and to give it to himself so he could live forever, so he could and you never die, because he always comes back. He does technically achieve this in a way when he gets spring locked after the closing of the third Freddy's, and he dies and comes back to life as Springtrap, and later evolving into Scraptrap. He does technically live forever because he always comes back in his new reanimated form. That can be that. That's why he would also automate the killing process by making the fun times. They can snatch up all the children for him, and he can continue to do the experiment of remnant by himself, while new victims and much more remnants being brought in, so he doesn't have to do all that time wasting. And we would even have an explanation to how he figured it out. After he murdered Charlie, he probably noticed that she was possessed, that the puppet was possessed by her. It was acting strange, and he probably wanted to figure this out more, so he murdered the 5 children. And he would have realized then that for certain, Dave could possess these things and control them. But my theory on why he kills, why he did all this, was for one reason in particular. Here's my reason, what I believe why he killed. In Five Nights at Freddy's 4, at the end of the game, when you die as Evan, the youngest child in the Afton family, at least at the time period of 1983, you're spoken to by Fredbear, and he says that you are broken, I'll put you back together, in quotes. Now that text is a little different shade of yellow than he normally speaks in. It's noticeably lighter than the yellow that he speaks in. This is because it's William speaking to him through the Fredbear plush. In the secret office room in the alternate ending to the FNAF sister location game, we can find a Fredbear plush with a walkie-talkie next to it. And of course, we know that the sister location facility is built right underneath the Afton household and Fredbear's family diner from one of the early nights in Five Nights at Freddy's sister location. So it can be easily clearly stated that William Afton is speaking to his son through the Fredbear plush. Who else could it be? As the explanation is that he is so busy with his work, he doesn't have the time to watch over his son. So that's why he always tells him tomorrow is another day, and he's of course aware of his old eldest son bullying his youngest son, but he's too busy overworked to do much about it. But at the end of the game, it's a different shade of yellow. It's lighter to show that he's no longer speaking to him via Fredbear, speaking to him as William Afton. I believe he's done all of this to try to achieve that, to put Evan back together. He said so, I will put you back together. Because if he was really doing all this just so he could live forever, never die, then did he just forget about what he said? Did he really just say, I'll put you back together? And never got around to doing that, you know? It's just kind of like you get amnesia when he said, I will put you back together, you go broken and stuff. And when Nightmare Fredbear kills you in UCN, he makes a joke about that. He says, quote, let me put you back together and take you apart all over again. End quote. So even Nightmare Fredbear, who could maybe be the spirit of his eldest son, is aware that he said to the representation of Fredbear, which could easily be, of course, Evan, because Evan was killed by Fredbear, that he, and also why would he say it to him? If it wasn't him who said it, it had to have been him who said it. It wouldn't make any sense, but to be irony, since he said it. And so, William tried to fulfill that promise. William wanted to put his son back together, and so it went for all of this to try and figure it out. That first murder in 1983 of Charlie, which would happen maybe within the first few days or weeks after the bite, already shortly after Evan died from his injuries, he killed Charlie more of a fit of rage and anger, and was more emotionally distraught over that. He fully planned out and calculated the kill. He just pulled up, saw her outside, and killed her. Well, once she possessed a puppet, which we know for certain she did, and most likely the puppet started showing signs not long afterwards, he probably realized that Charlie possessed a puppet. And then after the Springlock suit incidents, there was a creation of the Shadow animatronics, and who's to say he didn't see them, And he decided to experiment with this more. He murdered the 5 children, and realized that they were possessed. They possessed the animatronics, they could control them, they could walk, the spirits could make them walk around and move, and that these beings could even kill people while under the control of these children. And so he realized this, and thought that this could be a way to bring his son back to life. And he, along the way, discovered Remnant, and figured that he could do this to bring his son back. He could raise his son from the dead. And so he killed 5 more children when the next location opened up. And that's why he tried to kill that other kid. I'd reckon that other kid was probably maybe at the Springlock location, because we only know of 2 Freddy Fazbears, And I guess you could say this was the 3rd Freddy Fazbear, but it's just easier to say that there was 2 Freddy Fazbears operating at once. And that's why he tried to kill that other kid mentioned in the Ticket to Fun book, because he wanted to make him like them, so he could figure out more about this. Of course, he failed, but so he had to wait 2 years until 1987, because they were all closed down. And when Freddy Fazbear's Pizza reopened again, and, he killed 5 more. And when those possessed toys, because the toys are obviously possessed, your eyes turn all black, just like little white peoples in them, And it specifically says how they're really aggressive around adults, but are normal around children. This stuff, clear and normal around children. And if you go off of the Five Nights at Freddy's movies, they're kind of the same way. They're friends with Abby, but will without hesitation kill adults. Of course, they only kill that because William Afton directed them to. But under normal circumstances, they wouldn't. But that's just the movies. But still, they're very clearly possessed. And what else would these dead bodies lying around the restaurant we see in the death minigames be? They have to be more children who died. And so once he saw this happen again, if William went under like a pseudonym to get the job, and then transferred over to the day shift afterwards, he realized that these things were possessed. That dead bodies can possess creatures, control over them, and that's why he automated things and made Circus Baby's Pizza World. And of course, eventually, his daughter Elizabeth, who may have been born after the event in 1983, or was born maybe shortly before it. It was most likely born before the event, because we see a pink room, a flower, a mangled thing. It's probably her room. So he was born in like 1980s or something like that. But anyways, so he does these things with the fun times. He allows you to mimic voices, mimic smells, you capture children, and of course you circuit people for the clock, and you just grab them, pull them in, and pull them in. And so he does this to automate it, make it more efficient for him. So he doesn't have to do all the killing. So he can spend more time experimenting with trying to find a way to bring his son back to life. So you find a way to raise him from the dead, and of course, his own daughter gets killed by his creations in this attempt to do it. Now he only has one son, and he probably hates him. Now he just has Michael. Elizabeth is dead. He's basically got no one because he most for certain hates Michael probably. And so he shuts it down, takes them all underground, and he turns into Circus Baby's rentals. And so this is probably where they become. This is definitely where they become possessed. And I know for certain these things are possessed, And maybe that little dirt pile we can see in the Midnight Motors video, in the Midnight Motors minigame, if you get to the secret area where you go to juniors, go to your house, find out about your kid who you broke out, you can also find this little mound of dirt. It's kind of lying there. What could be why there's a random mound of dirt? Some people fear that it could be, twisted ones. Back when the books were still new, I remember seeing theories talking about that. What if that was his grave that he buried Evan there 6 feet under, so to be closer, and also to be easier so you could dig him out and bring him back to life, instead of having to drive all the way out to the cemetery, trespass and risk getting caught, and also the promises just as he died. So by the time we would have gone to the burial process, he would have been, I'm gonna bring my son back to life. I'm gonna raise him from the dead, and he's gonna live once again. So it makes sense to put him nearby, nearby the house. So he buried, and so that could be where he's buried. I mean, why else would there just be a random mound of dirt? It's kind of there. And so he buried him there, but despite all this, he could never achieve it. He wasn't able to bring his son back from the dead. And ultimately, he was killed in the process, probably killed in the process as well. As most people, of course, it's the reason why he destroyed the classic animatronics was maybe he was trying to harvest their remnant for the fun times. Some people believe that. I don't exactly believe that, but I do believe he was probably dismantling them to harvest their remnant so you could use it for more experiments. That seems very likely. But of course, I believe that the fun times are possessed by new victims. So that they took kids from these parties they were rented out to and possessed them. And of course, they possessed them. Because, one's already possessed, why wouldn't the rest be possessed? And so I agree with that first part of that theory that he dismantled them to harvest the remnant, but of course their souls were released and they chased after him. He ran away into the spring-lock suit, spring-locked. So in his attempt and search to bring his son back, he got himself killed. And he ended up killing one of his own children. And so, now he's got 2 problems on his hands. He's got 2 dead kids. And so, shortly before he did this, he sent Michael down there to try and fix that problem. He sent him down there so he could still deal with bringing Evan back to life. He's not going to do that because he's stuck on this one thing. Bringing his son Evan back to life. So he said to Michael, "Go down there and save his daughter." So you can keep focusing on this. Of course, Michael gets scooped. He gets his inside ripped out because they all believe he's William because they look alike. If they say Michael says so, and from the way they speak like they really think they're talking to Michael. So, of course, now everybody, and of course, Michael doesn't die, but he's a rotting, decaying corpse. He's a zombie. He died and he came back to life. He just fell to the ground. All plopped to just kind of. But he came back. There was probably remnant left inside of him. Elizabeth gave him some so he can come back to life. But he's a zombie now. He says he has to hide in the shadows, because of course he couldn't be accepted into regular society like that. He's a corpse. He's a zombie. They just scream and run. They think it's Night of the Living Dead. And so, in the end, William is stuck in purgatory, forever to be tortured by the spirits of the people he killed. And of course, you could possibly make the theory that the Cassidy, the vengeful spirit, is keeping these spirits here, holding them hostage, basically. Because when speaking, because in certain death lines, you could hear a faint voice like whispering what the animatronic who killed you, whispering what that line is. So the animatronic kills you, they say a line to you, but certain times you could hear a secondary voice whispering that line, like they're feeding that information into them. That could just be, of course, they could just be created all by her, or they could be, again, the spirits being held against their will. That could give more of an explanation to how, Nightmare Fredbear knows about that what he said. He's aware of what he said, because that could be Evan being held there, being forced to keep torturing his own dad after all these years. I mean, maybe he's a little bit angry. You're a little annoyed with him, You said you were going to put me back together, Dad, but you never did. You just killed all these children. Because he never did put his son back together. He could never, do that. He remained broken. Or at least until, they finally all passed on eventually. Because at some point in the timeline, the happiest day happened. We see it in the FNAF 3. Maybe it didn't happen when the Fazbear's Fright location burned down, but eventually they were all set free. Gabriel, Susie, Jeremy, Fritz, Charlie, and most likely the kid in the Fredbear mask is probably Evan, because the restaurant is structured like how Fredbear's was. You start to where the stage is. They go all the way to the other side, where the exit at the real Fredbear's would have been. And it's his happiest day, because his death happened on his birthday. And so, at some point in time, they eventually all are set free and go off to heaven. Though maybe Cassidy knew it, because there's a theory that Evan and Cassidy possess the same animatronic suit. They both possess the Fredbear, aka Golden Freddy. Fredbear and Golden Freddy are the same thing, just more withered down. Of course, there could be the explanation that in that time they were possessing the same suit together, he told her that. But, that's getting a little bit too far out, maybe. But there could be that. But, yeah, that's my explanation. That William had his son die, and he promised his son he would come back, he would bring him back to life. And in this course to bring his son back to life, he had to do all these horrible, terrible acts of murder and killing, and he lost his own daughter to it, and his own son was killed and returned as a zombie, and he himself died while trying to get more of this stuff so he could try and harness it to bring his son back. And now he was stuck for probably eternity, being tortured and in purgatory for these acts, which he never did achieve. He never did it. It was all done in vain. All the lives lost and all the pain had, all done in vain. That's my theory, basically. I'll see y'all around, ladies and gentlemen. Bye, have a nice time.